It's just insane to me. But my guest is here, the man himself, Peter Coffin. Peter
Hey,
Coffin, there we are. Peter Coffin is a journalist with over 250,000 YouTube subscribers, podcaster, and author. In their book, Custom Reality and You, they explore a world where profit is the driving force and horseshoe theory is the other one. Horseshoe theory is the other one. How you doing, man? You doing all right this morning?
I'm good. I had wisdom teeth surgery on Monday, which is why this side of my face is it's not the right size.
Oh, you're right. You're right. It's you're so right. It's weird. It looks like it's in an indent, but I
Yeah.
realize it's not an indent. It's just the other side is swollen.
Oh, you should have seen it the other day, though.
Would you look like a woodchuck just sitting
I
here with
did.
the
I
cheeks
looked like I was storing away nuts for the winter.
But you're doing okay though. It's healing. I mean,
Yeah. Oh,
one of the big
definitely. Yeah,
factors.
I'm doing a lot better. I was the first day I couldn't even do anything, but I'm doing pretty good now.
Jeez, that's the hazard of talking for a living.
Yeah.
And
You
you
don't
got
know
the
when to
tools.
do this stuff. It's like,
Yeah,
should I do this now or should I? Because
yeah. It's like you got to talk at some point, and I
yeah,
talk for a living. Anytime your mouth is damaged, that's not working. I was talking to the audience about Nicole Shanahan. So RFK has been going through his testimony hearings, and as I was telling the audience, there's a huge amount of buzz associated with RFK being at those hearings. I sat here and watched those hearings for a good hour yesterday. Having seen the fight with him and Elizabeth Warren, seeing Bernie Sanders being a bit gruff, asking him, does he support is healthcare a human right? And he's like, a human right? I don't know. He was humming and hawing on whether or not it was a human right. Okay, but fair enough. They seem to have some level of agreement in regards to bringing down drug costs, effectively saying, well, yeah, you're right. We should be paying the same amount, or we should be paying more than what they're paying in Europe. Again, fair
yeah,
enough.
yeah.
Um, he may have a difficult way to go, though, especially among some of the Democrats. In fact, this is a clip of RFK. I think Brave put this one up. So shout out to Chief Nerd
Camera.
right here, just to give a clip of what we're referring to.
That's not good for farmers. We can now not export American food to Europe because the Europeans won't take our food. That's not good for farmers. We're also destroying our soil because some of the chemicals that farmers use destroy the microbiome, and that causes the erosion of the soil. You can't get water infiltration. Water pools up and it washes the soil off. Agronomists now estimate that we only have, if we continue doing these processes, only 60 harvests left before our soil is gone. Farmers are using.
Now, to be fair, he was shaky on some of the facts associated with some of the other items that came up. But all things being equal, fair enough, hearing. So Nicole Shanahan comes out and she says, look, I have given a lot of money to Democrats. I've given a lot of money to Republicans. And if he is not confirmed, all hell will break loose. I will use my billions of dollars to eviscerate your campaigns coming up. She said, Bobby is playing nice. I am not. This is Nicole Shanahan. This is astonishing to me that these billionaires have decided we are now going to come out of the woodwork and we are now going to assert ourselves. This is amazing.
In front of the Senate Finance Committee for his confirmation hearing to be our nation's next Secretary of Health and Human Services. I urge everyone to call their U.S. senators over the following days and demand they vote yes on Bobby's nomination. He is more than qualified. He's proven, principled, and prepared to lead. I'll share a list below of key off. Please know I will be watching your votes very closely. I will make it my personal mission that you lose your seats in the Senate if you vote against the future health of America's children. And more than that, I also want to say to Senators Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, Bill Cassidy, Tom Tillis, James Lankford, Cory Booker, John Fetterman, Bernie Sanders, and Catherine Cortez Masto, This is a bipartisan message, and it comes directly from me. While Bobby may be willing to play nice, I won't. If you vote against him, I will personally fund challengers to primary you in your next election, and I will enlist hundreds of thousands to join me. Big Pharma and Big Ag have exploited us for far too long. It ends now. You're either on the side of transparency and accountability, or you are standing in the way. The choice.
I am astonished by that. Like, it's not so much like I told the audience before, I want RFK to be in that spot. So just
Yeah.
biases to be open. But God, man, it is super creepy to me that a billionaire will come out and effectively say, I am going to change the political process, meaning I am going to put a huge amount of money into getting this person or that person taken out of office because of the vote that they made, that they didn't necessarily agree with a particular candidate. And so it's like, what, we're going to have these money arms races? I mean, I guess that's what we have now anyway, but that is not necessarily a positive thing for a political process to be so ensconced with cash that the ones who can scream the loudest, meaning the one with the most money, are the ones that's going to effectively run the roost. And just to make a clear point before I pass this over, APAC giving what, like $100 million. Elon Musk dropping like $50 million into Donald Trump's coffers or campaign. Bloomberg, when he ran, dropping $1 billion in a primary in his campaign. Like the amount of money that these people are effectively putting into that process. And then add to the fact that 90% of the races are won by the side with the most cash. So the person who can muscle the most money 90% of the time will be able to get their candidate across the finish line in, let's say, the House of Representatives or the Senate. Presidency is a little bit different. Give me your take on this. This is a disturbing new norm for me.
Well, I agree. I think my primary opinion is like these people, RFK is among people who have called out money in politics as well. I mean, this is my primary thing is that's very hypocritical. If you're going to, I mean, even though he's not doing it, she's doing it. She's like, Bobby's playing nice, I'm not. It's not necessarily, a completely different apparatus that is talking at the moment. It's just, it's something that it's hypocritical. And if you're going to want the trust of the American people, you can't do stuff like this. At least that's my opinion. I don't trust it, obviously. But on the other hand, I also think, well, what would I do if I had $1 billion? I would probably try to manipulate the political system so that people's lives were better because I know that's how it works.
Right.
So
right.
There's two sides to it. The first side is the one that I err towards. I'm not going to have $1 billion anytime soon. And a lot of the people who have $1 billion don't have it for good reason because they've been helping everybody out along the way. It's so on the other hand, it's where I say if I had $1 billion, I would probably do the same thing. It would also be a very different set of conditions that would put $1 billion in my hands. I don't know why the hell I would have that kind of money.
Yeah, that's the other thing. My mom used to always say she didn't want to be rich. She just wanted to be well off. And I guess I feel the same way. I don't need to be rich. I don't need $50 million. I just want,
I agree.
When I want to take a trip, I want to be able to take a trip. I don't want to be hungry. I want to be able to live where I want to live. But that doesn't require me to be rich. Yeah, I guess I agree with you. I guess when you put it in those terms, it's like, well, yeah, if I had $1 billion, what would I use my $1 billion for? And would I use it to try to affect social change that I think is to the betterment of the nation?
And we know for a fact that's how change happens in this country. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, money does it. So, but also you and I can say that we're again not going to be people to come into $1 billion anytime soon. The conditions that get you $1 billion are not conditions we're sitting in,
That is very true. Unless somebody is just going to drop me a check for $1 billion from doing the show, not so much. Did you see, by the way, Menendez gets 11 years in prison? Did you see that?
I actually didn't see that.
So right here, Menendez, he was in trial over the corruption case. And I believe his wife was on trial with him, Nadine, I believe her name is. And so the verdict came back. Oh, these Stupid pop-ups right here.
Wow.
Former U.S. Senator Bob Menendez get 11 years in prison for taking bribes and acting as an agent of Egypt.
That should scare all of them, because I don't think that any of them aren't.
Well, he said it's a witch hunt. He said this is a witch hunt. I didn't do
Of course.
anything wrong. I'm completely innocent. And mind you, Menendez only escaped by the skin of his teeth. One of the other, the last time they had brought him up on corruption charges. Like, I think it was like a hung jury, and that was the only thing that got him out of going to jail, even in that case. And so apparently, just on the reporting, people were saying that his wife was somewhat of a bad influence. They thought his wife was the one that was making some of these connections. 11 years. 11 years. Menendez has been there forever.
I don't know. To me, it's like, I hear that and like, oh, they got Bob Menendez. It's like, well, what about Nancy Pelosi and all of her insider trading?
Yeah.
What about, all these obvious representatives of U.S. oil companies? What about, that's the stuff that when I see them get one guy, he's clearly done something other than that made them mad. Like, that's all I can figure, because there's so much corruption in the Senate and the House. These people are like, the representative from, we talked about this either last time or the other time. I used to live in Berrien County, Michigan, and the representative from that district is Fred Upton from the Whirlpool company. Whirlpool HQ is in Benton Harbor, Michigan, and the representative of that district happens to be the heir to the Whirlpool fortune. It's like, okay.
Wow.
It's just like, it's so hard for me to take one of them being prosecuted seriously. If you prosecuted a big group of them, I would be like, okay, maybe they're actually going after corruption. But to me, it seems very selective in how they would do it. Because I could point out conflicts of interest in the guy who they keep voting in my hometown county,
Yeah, selective prosecution is not justice, or selective justice is not justice, I used to say.
Yeah.
And I agree with you, but yeah, our political system is so screwed up. Like, I give an example. Joe Biden, for example, the influence peddling thing. Joe Biden has been doing this long enough to know that, he's not going to sign his name on a contract. He's not going to write anything that's going to get him caught in any kind of overt sense. You're not going to find an email with Joe Biden saying, "Thank you for the bribe. I appreciate the money," that type of thing.
Oh, like Joe Biden uses email. I don't use email, man. What's online? I don't use online.
It's like,
what
is that
email?
even? And yet he's making policy on these things. So Rudy Giuliani, to give an example of what I mean by this, Rudy Giuliani, John Kiriakou was trying to get a pardon. And by the way, John Kiriakou is doing a speaking engagement in Europe. I was actually trying to bring him in so he can have a conversation about the JFK files, but it's going to be a couple of weeks. But whatever. John Kiriakou was saying he was trying to get a pardon for Giuliani. Giuliani was selling pardons at one point, effectively saying, you can buy a pardon for me, have it in with Trump, give me money, and I'll give you the pardon. So they have a conversation with the lawyer. So him, his attorney, Giuliani, his attorney are sitting there, they're eating, they're talking. The pardon never comes up. And John effectively says, okay, well, what about the pardon? Giuliani gets up, goes to the bathroom, and his lawyer says, you don't talk to him about that, you talk to me about that. Now, this is insulation, right? It's like, you're not going to catch Giuliani with anything. Giuliani's been doing this long enough to know where that line is in regards to what is legal versus what's not, despite the fact that all of it is unethical. And so with Hunter Biden, and that was my biggest issue with the Hunter Biden stuff, it's like Joe Biden clearly knows that they're using his name for influence. Like when you have somebody send a letter saying, I'm sitting here with my father, and you either give me $20 million or else all of his political people are going to be very angry at you. Okay, well, nobody's scared about Hunter Biden like that. He doesn't have clout like that on its own. Sure. You may be scared about Joe Biden and Joe Biden's political associates if you feel that you're going to be locked out of some kind of political process or locked out of this ability to get something out of it. So I agree with you. I guess my point is I agree with that's a lot of wood chop to say I agree with you on this.
Well, there's a lot of instances of this. I mean, obviously the type of corruption is specific to this guy. There's going to be very specific evidence and conditions that go alongside how they prosecuted him. Like every case is going to be different. But on the other hand, how many cases are there if we really wanted to make cases out of everything? That's the question I have. I think about it, and like I said, I can tell you one right from my home county of Berrien County in Michigan. I can tell you, I can point to Nancy Pelosi and all the crazy insider trading. I think that's the most obvious of all of them because she made hundreds of millions of dollars at this point.
By the way, when DeepSeek came out, when that product came out, I think it was like $1 trillion evaporated from the NASDAQ, like up in smoke. Pelosi apparently had traded a bunch of stocks just before it came out. There's something inherently wrong with this. Like, I can't believe that they think it's okay for a Congress member who is looking and knowing what legislation is coming up, knowing what's coming over the horizon, and it's allowed to make trades knowing what's coming on the horizon. Like, it's
crazy.
clearly insider trading.
It's crazy too. And let's say it's somebody making trades on her behalf. It's still the same. It's the same thing.
Same
we know that's the same. Like the instance that you gave with Rudy Giuliani, like legally is it Rudy Giuliani doing it? Probably not. It's probably his lawyer or some person in his apparatus. But I mean, it's them doing it. It's people doing their will, their bidding, et cetera, et cetera. It's so absurd. The idea. I didn't know about Nancy Pelosi trading off a bunch of stock before DeepSeek came out, but it's of course, like it seems like of course,
it's just stunning. Like I saw that and it was like, how is this okay? Like, and it's not like it's even a secret, right? It's like people know that Nancy Pelosi has a ton of money. They know that she made a ton of money trading stocks. Even AOC was in the situation saying, "This is outrageous. How are these people?"
She was on Jon Stewart the other day talking about it. I remember seeing a clip of it, and I was like, "Well, thanks AOC for saying the thing that we've been saying for years." But, but I mean, it's nice to at least hear a sitting member of Congress say it, whether it's AOC or not. But I mean, how much money does AOC have? Like, the question is, are you saying that to keep people off your trail? I don't know.
Well, I think your point is corruption is all over the place. And going after one guy feels not fair. Like, it feels like so inadequate. Oh, and by the way, even the situation with Mayor Adams. So, apparently Mayor Adams is in talks with the Trump administration on dropping the case against him. Now, Adams at the time was saying this is a witch hunt. Joe Biden is angry because I was going after him about the immigration stuff. I mean, all of these people talk about this stuff as being political witch hunts, despite the fact that this was a Democratic administration that was going after Menendez. And it was a Democratic administration going after, what's his name? Mayor Adams. Yeah. So I don't know. I agree with you. I would love, what we need in this country? We used to have this Truth and Reconciliation Commission for the CIA. And every so often, and again, I don't even know how to even pull this off, because the moment that somebody do anything on this front, they're going to say it's politically motivated. If a Republican do it, they're going to say a Democrat is, they're doing this to go after their political opponents on the other side. And if a Republican do it, they're going to say, well, they're going after Democrats. This is, this is clearly ideologically driven. And they will probably be right. But is that just necessary? Like, meaning, is it a situation where it may be necessary for one political party to have a witch hunt and then the other political party have a witch hunt? And I don't mean witch hunt in the sense of making stuff up. I mean, you're going after a corruption purely from this idea of we're going after corruption, full stop. Would that even work in our politics? I mean, we have effectively legalized bribery in our politics.
Yeah, I think that's a tough one, because what you just said, I think there's a lot of this that is just straight up legal. Like, if you do it with one party removed, like we were talking about Giuliani, or we talk about the super PACs and corporations donating money to certain campaigns, as long as they don't coordinate. But they coordinate. Like, they have ways of coordinating. They dump a bunch of stock footage onto some website for you to not make commercials with or whatever. They coordinate. They know what they're doing.
I'm not saying you can use any of this for commercials. Wink, wink.
Yeah, and for some reason, there's just 13 hours of Ted Cruz stock footage out there.
Right.
I don't know why, but here's 13 hours of Ted Cruz doing campaigny looking stuff in a set.
Or you might have somebody like Newt Gingrich, where he's doing a commercial and he's like, "Yeah, we should talk about so and so." And you can imagine that the super PAC is listening to his interviews, and they're like, oh, "Okay, so he wants to talk about so and so." Is that coordination? Yeah, of course it's coordination. Is it? Can you prove that? Not really. No.
It's coded at best.
Yeah.
I know it's. But they again, you said that we've essentially legalized corruption in that respect.
Yeah.
And, the problem with that is we do need some sort of truth and reconciliation. We do need to somehow reckon with this. How do we do that now? I think the real question is, how do we do a truth and how do we actually hold all of these people, regardless of partisan affiliation, accountable for this stuff? I don't know at this point, because they all have so much influence internally in the system. We've talked about the Twitter files, and we've talked about the influence the Biden administration had on various social media. Social media is so far removed from that. The fact that they had that much influence in it, you have to imagine the closer you get to the actual power, the more influence they have. When you think about it that way, it's actually kind of scary. It's like, how do you actually hold them accountable other than these, like you said, these partisan bickering? It does get these people motivated to suss out some corruption, but then it's very one-sided. We do need kind of maybe a battle royale witch hunt with all of them going at each other at once.
And that sounds horrible, right? I mean, I don't want this kind of overt political bias where they're trying to put the opposition party in prison because it's the opposition party while giving a pass to their own side. I don't want that nonsense. But it feels like that's the best you get. It's almost like you have to use one goblin to go after, a witch doctor or something. It's like I have to use one to go after the other one.
But then the problem is you get in bed with the goblins. That's probably one of my besides the gay frogs. That's one of my favorite Alex Jones quotes.
But is there a way? I guess is there any way out of that? It seems like the political process forces that behavior. It forces me to, okay, I'm going to back this guy, even though, for example, Trump is a really good example. I want to end the war in Ukraine. All right. You have two political parties. Both political parties are effectively war parties. All right. Trump, with all of the negatives associated with him, says, I'll end the war. Okay, so now I'm in a weird position. I want to end the war, but he has all of these other negatives associated with it, and all of these things are a package deal. There's no way out of it where you can say, okay, I just want this one item. I just want the sausage biscuit without the eggs. You can't do that. You got to eat the egg with the sausage biscuit. And it's like, okay, there's no way out of that process. It's like you're stuck with this crappy, Daniel Lazare, his point was always, we need a new U.S. Constitution, that we need to effectively rip up the Constitution. It's too old, it's crickety, it doesn't work right, and we need to redo it in a way that makes more sense. And to his point, when you start off with a political process, it's like it has the mint smell to it. It's like a fresh new car. It's like, whoo, this car smells great. And everybody is trying to be honest, everybody's trying to be right. And then, 2-3 generations later, okay, well, they found ways to kind of, tweak the system a bit. They found loopholes. You have people who are less wed to the political ideals of it. And at that point, it's just more, and what can I get out of it? And then you go, 10 generations, and we're here. I don't know how you unravel that. Well, what do you think about this idea of ripping up the Constitution and having this kind of constitutional convention? I don't trust that either, by the way.
Yeah, I don't. That to me sounds like a bad idea. I mean, I think that the Constitution isn't a fundamentally massively flawed document. I think that if you go at a very generalized level, you're not going to get a very different document than that if you're going to attempt to guarantee the things that it attempts to guarantee. Because the more specific you get, the less you can really, I think, talk about things on that on the level of like the basis of the country.
Yeah.
You couldn't get too specific, and therefore I think you would have a similar document one way or the other. I think the best thing to do, honestly, it makes me think of, there was a few years ago, Michigan, my home state, again, voted to attempt to fight gerrymandering by establishing an independent commission of citizens in the state who were, I think, voted on, and it did actually have an effect. I don't know that it made the entire state perfect or anything, but having an independent commission of citizens, as opposed to, I mean, obviously you can corrupt that, but there's probably some sort of, process you can put that through that does some sort of sorting out of varying embedded interests. But as far as I know, it actually did help. The Republican Party kind of firmly had a grip on a lot of various areas, and there's a couple of areas that the Democrats had a very firm grip on due to districting. And I do think that it was made more fair, if I remember right. I'm obviously going off of a couple of years. It's been a few years since I've lived in Michigan. But if I remember right, it was at least somewhat successful. And I would think that maybe something more along those lines is just outsiders, people who are not in the political system, need to be somehow brought in for an accountability commission of some kind, maybe. I don't know. I feel like if we trust them with their own, like, how do we fix this? They're not gonna. Even if we did a constitutional thing where we started over with the Constitution, who's the people who are gonna remake the Constitution today? Is the people who, they're all corrupt, and we're talking about this because of these people. They would be the people that are in charge of that, and I wouldn't want that.
By the way, I used to make the same argument to Daniel. I was like, I know, but all of these people are corrupt. Like, all of these people, we're complaining. Because the truth of the matter is, I would ask him, I was like, well, what's the difference between the people who were living then, let's say in the 1700s, versus the people who are living now? Or hell, people in the 1800s or 1950s. Like, why is it just so happen to be now? I mean, the Constitution, for all intents and purposes, is effectively a similar document. I mean, it may not be exactly the same when you add amendments and everything else to it, but it's effectively the same document. It seems to be a person issue or people issue, where they've gotten so accustomed to kind of soaking in this pool that they figured out all of the ways to make the process better and more corrupt, as opposed to kind of living up to their highest ideals. It's the incentives that are built into the process where they've gotten better at using. So, and maybe it's always running downhill. Maybe it's always the situation where the best thing that you could do is start off and have to keep redoing something over and over and over again. There's a story that I am fascinated by. Have you seen this? So Donald Trump came out and he keeps talking about the $50 million in condoms that were sending to Gaza. Did you see this?
I have seen it.
So listen to, I want you to hear this, because there's a fantastic factoid associated with this that is mind-blowing. This is Trump talking about $50 million in condoms that were sent to Gaza that they apparently used to make bombs or something to that effect. This is Trump.
In that process, we identified and stopped $50 million being sent to Gaza to buy condoms for Hamas. 50 million. And you know what's happened to them? They've used them as a method of making bombs. How about that? In that process, we identified and stopped $50 million being sent to Gaza.
All right. So $50 million. Joe Biden was sending $50 million to Hamas. I'm sorry, $50 million in condoms. Condoms, no less.
How about that?
How about that? I love that, right? Come to find out that this wasn't exactly $50 million going to Gaza. It was going to Gaza and Mozambique, Africa, not Gaza, Palestine, not in the Middle East. Like, meaning this was in Africa. This was apparently, so right here, just so happened it was sent to the province of Gaza and Mozambique, the country located on southeast coast of Africa. Hamas, Gaza, Palestine did not receive $50 million worth of U.S. condoms from that grant, like Trump said earlier. That's astonishing. That's astonishing. And
Well,
keep
you
in
know
mind,
what
the
that sounds
reason-
like to me It sounds like it sounds like something passed his desk and he saw the word Gaza on it, which
he
is
ran with it.
it doesn't sound.
Apparently, well, apparently that
That's
was like
a
a
Biden move right there.
That's a Trump move. That is a unique Trump move. Like that, I can't even think Joe Biden would have screwed something up. Like Joe Biden
I
might
guess
have,
that's fair. Yeah.
he would have made the mistake of saying it wrong. Agreed.
Yeah.
He would have butchered it horribly. It is a unique Trumpian thing to come out, get it wrong, and then lie on top of getting it wrong. Because it's not just they sent $50 million in condoms to Gaza. It's they sent $50 million in condoms to Gaza, and Hamas used them to make bombs.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, dude, how did Hamas use them to make bombs if it wasn't?
I don't know. It seems like what they do. We all know about Hamas. We know they like making bombs out of sugar. They must be able to do it out of condoms. I figure they do it out of condoms.
Oh, this is outrageous.
I just figured it, you know. What would you do with that many condoms? I know I would. It's too many.
I mean, Puffy had 1,000 containers of lube. What did he do with all that lube? You know, somebody made the point of saying they didn't even go through one bottle of lube. How did he go through 1,000?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was Dave Chappelle in his SNL monologue.
That's who it was. That's who it was.
He was like, I don't think I have ever in my entire life seen the end of a bottle of baby oil.
Yeah.
I've thrown
And he's
away
right.
a completely empty bottle of baby oil. And it's like, yeah, that's 100% true. I
Yeah.
can't think of a time either.
I can't think of once where I've went through an entire bottle of baby oil, like just at all. And he has 1,000. And then, you know, what's so sad about it when the cops are like, make sure it's like 1,000 bottles. Yeah, we got to put that in the report.
Yeah, make
That's
sure
gonna be
we're accounting for the 1,000 bottles here. Each and every one. But then
Well,
that
my
does
point
make
is,
you ask the question, like, you know, that's probably how he came up with the bombs thing. What are they doing with that many condoms? I can't even think of what they do with that many condoms, especially like if he thinks it's the other Gaza, he has to be like, well, what do they do there? Must be bombs.
see, when I first heard the story, I thought, okay, well, maybe Joe Biden is doing this because he's trying to keep the kid population down in Gaza. That was my first thought. That, okay, Joe Biden is working at the behest of Israel. They want to have at least as many kids as possible because, again, they want to take the territory. I mean, in my mind, it's a settler colonial stuff. To take that into, they're using those condoms to make bombs is astonishing. And then even more so when you find out it's not even Hamas.
Wrong Gaza.
Yeah.
We got the wrong Gaza. We saw Gaza and we thought that one. I guess there's another one.
It's just bizarre, man.
I guess there's another Gaza.
It's like, we didn't know there was another Gaza. There were two Gaza. Who would have known? Who would have known?
Yeah.
No, man. It's just
Did
bizarre.
you know there was another Gaza? I don't think you did.
No, I did not. But at the same token, though, I didn't have my press person coming out there saying,
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't come out as president of the U.S. getting briefings, coming out saying $50 million in condoms. Just outrageous. Did you see this other story that 90% of Ukrainian media was getting? So one of the reports that come out talked about independent media. They use the term independent media is now suffering because they found out to 80 to 90% of the money that goes into independent media across the world is being paid by the U.S. government. And when Trump killed U.S. aid, then all of it hit the skids. I am fascinated with this. They're even saying the same thing in Ukraine. It's like you independent Ukrainian media, 90% of it was being paid by the U.S. government. And so there's like, okay, well, wait a minute. Is that really independent media?
No.
If 90% was being paid by the U.S. government?
Yeah, and they shut down Sputnik.
Yeah.
So that brings us back to another interesting line of conversation. Why is the U.S. allowed to have that much state media in other countries? Because that's clearly what it was. If we shut down the state funding of it and it shuts down all this quote unquote independent media, it brings us right back to that question.
I hate to interrupt, but the article said that they were independent media, Peter. Independent media. I mean, the article said they were independent media.
I guess, yeah, you're right. The article said it. And obviously, our press never lies.
You know what's wild about that? Because you have a damn good point on that. So me working at Sputnik, that is state media.
Yeah.
And if the Russian government is putting money into it, the US government putting in 90% of the revenue for the media organization that gets called independent. That's outrageous.
That's the rule.
That's
but
outrageous.
not for me.
That is outrageous. That's
It's
just
awful.
outrageous. And by the way,
Honestly, when you think about what those quote unquote, I mean, Sputnik, you could very easily, I mean, they've characterized it as attempting to influence things in the US. But as far as I've ever listened to it, it's always been folks like yourself and again, Malik, who is on the right wing of it, but also very skeptical of pretty much everybody across the spectrum.
yeah,
It's more along the side of that than it is like straight up like, oh, this is what Russia wants you to think.
Exactly.
Whereas I guarantee you the quote unquote independent media in Ukraine is a lot like the same independent media in Ukraine 10 years ago, funded by George Soros, intended to cause a color revolution.
Agreed.
You know, it's that kind of independent media. It's and that's the thing, is a lot of people don't even think about all the Ukraine situation in the context of all of the money spent in order to cause erosion of trust in various types of government. Like there was they elected a sympathetic government
Good point.
or not a sympathetic, but just like somebody who wasn't hostile towards Russia in 2014. And so they spent all of this money like influencing the media there to get everybody against that thing. And then they had a certain, group of people who was rowdy and they were rioting. I mean, it was a peaceful revolution in the sense that it wasn't like an armed revolution, but it was riots and stuff. And I mean, that stuff there today is happening because of that stuff. And clearly we still have that going on.
Yeah, I have a hard time believing that there's going to be a divergent point of view. I mean, and like I said, it was violent. I mean, it was 100 people got killed. You had these snipers that were shooting people. They didn't blaming it on the cops. It's just outrageous stuff. I think to your point, though, is the notion that this is independent is absurd.
Absolutely.
Here's the catch. I know people, when you're working for a Russian media or something like that, I remember when I went in, my first thought was like, okay, I know what people say, but what's true? Like, meaning, am I going to be pushed? I mean, I had prepared early on, okay, if you get pushed, you can always leave. Because at that point, you're doing your show. If you need to bail, you can always just do your show. If worse comes to worse, I don't necessarily want to be in a situation where somebody is telling me to run one story or the other. Yeah. That is not the way it works. And shockingly, I would argue that we had far more freedom and something like that than at MSNBC. Like if you listen to like Cenk Uygur or you listen to Crystal Ball, and they talk about those stories, or even Ed Schultz about what it was like working on the MSNBC. They had a very specific line that they had to toe. And when you didn't toe that line, you were either going to lose your job or you were going to have to talk. That wasn't the way it worked for us. It seemed that what they wanted, it seems that they came to the assessment somewhere along the way that the U.S. is lying. And because the U.S. is lying, then what we need to do is just be straight with the story. So just give a straight story. Just give the context for the story. That's all you really need to do. You don't need to make it up. In fact, if you're making stuff up, it undercuts your credibility when you're doing the story. And so that was what we did. Our thing was they used to get pissed at us when we got a fact wrong or we got something off. More so than anything else, our job was get the story right. No more, no less.
I mean, the truth shall set you free,
Yeah, but that's, I guarantee you, though, that is not what is coming out of Ukraine right now. This is not this notion of independent media. Like, just astonishing. Like, even to write that in an article saying 90% of the money is coming from the U.S. to independent media.
I mean, how many of the radio-free blankety blanks are out there that we know how they operate? They're just propaganda arms of the CIA in these various countries. Radio-free, blanket. It doesn't even matter what country you say. There's a radio-free something, radio-free Europe, radio-free, Asia, radio-free, blah, blah, blah. And that's, I mean, on record as being a CIA project.
I mean, the entire point of using like the National Endowment for Democracy, USAID, was so they wouldn't have to be so overt with the CIA doing this stuff, that you can basically have these kind of color revolutions, these government pressure on various governments under this notion of aid, of NGOs doing the work that the CIA would have typically did in the past. And so
Yep.
that's what they use it for. And so when you're seeing Ukraine flip it out, oh my God, we're losing money because he put a stop on the US aid. I would wager to you, in whether it was in Georgia, whether it's in Romania, whether it's in Hungary, all of these groups on some level are probably getting money from US aid in order to affect changes and pressure against governments they don't necessarily like. And so
Absolutely.
we're just seeing this element of it taking place in Ukraine. I guarantee you it's going all across the world. Like, the amount of money that we spend on influence is astonishing. And it seems that when Donald Trump has come to the conclusion, why are we paying influence money? Why are we paying influence money? We could just tell them what to do. And if they don't do it, we'll just pass sanctions. We'll destroy their economy. So why are we giving honey in order to get the bees? We could just, forcibly, I don't have a good analogy for that. That's a horrible corner to go into. But basically, we don't have to be nice to them. They're our vassals.
Can
We just
smoke
tell
the
them
bees
what to
instead of
do.
give them honey.
Thank you. We can smoke. Yeah, we can smoke the bees as opposed to give them honey. Thank you. I was trapped by the framing of the of the sentence structure. I couldn't get out. But no, man, it's fascinating. Like, and there's something disturbing about that. Like,
Yeah.
I get it, right? When you're dealing with governments are going to want to influence other governments. Okay, fair enough. We make money out of thin air. And
Yeah.
when making money out of thin air, we then use the money that we made out of thin air to influence other governments, even to the point of overthrowing those governments when we don't necessarily like what those governments are doing. It's just astonishing. No other government can really do that. Just outrageous.
Yeah. I mean, I've done a lot of study on like the color revolutions and, the Open Society Foundation, the National Endowment for
That's
Democracy.
Soros. Open Society is Soros, right?
Yeah, it's Soros. Yeah, it's Soros, and then there's NED and USAID are the three big things involved in that. I mean, there are other organizations that are smaller that are, but it's a wild bit of like the amount of influence that you can do so much of this with just media if the media is coordinating. Once you have a coordinating media, you can do so much to change reality. Like, to get back to what I'm always talking about, this is the reason why I've looked into that kind of stuff. But it's money can make reality. I also talk about how free speech isn't really free speech, it's paid speech. The people who are able to spend money are the people who are able to say what they want to say. It's that simple. And if you have the people controlling the actual airwaves and narrative and all of that, if those people have a certain agenda, that's the agenda that gets heard, and everybody's breathing that air, and I mean, it's not shocking that they were able to undermine entire countries that way. It's actually, especially people who are unsuspecting, we in the United States have lived in a situation where the media has been untrustworthy for a very long time. We know to at least some extent not to trust the media, just straightforwardly. But a lot of these countries were just developing places that just didn't have a media before. It's wild. It's wild the rabbit hole you can get into talking about that.
And in the old days, it wasn't this kind of open secret that the U.S. knocked over governments. Like in the old days, that's not something you would say. I remember doing the Iran Contra affair, and you had Colonel North, you had all of these people. It was like speech after speech and case after case, and this thing went on for weeks. And that was the first time, at least that I'm aware of, where it was on the pages, like where it was like splashed in the media. Oh my God, we took all of this money to try to overthrow these governments in South America. And this was what they passed the Bolin Act to prevent Reagan from doing it. Reagan did it anyway. And I remember this famous speech where Reagan comes out and the Gipper comes on. And it's like that old thing where they showed the White House first and then it goes to the president. And Reagan gives this astonishing speech of, I didn't know that they were going to try to overthrow the governments of South America, but I'm the Gipper. I'm the president. The buck stops with me, but I didn't really know about it. So, there's that.
Yeah.
And it goes off. And people are like, wait a minute. Did Reagan just say that the U.S. was overthrowing governments in South America? Yes, that is exactly what he just said.
I love that's probably one of my favorite aspects of the Iran Contra stuff is the idea that somehow he didn't have any involvement in it.
Yeah, the
like he
president
came out
didn't
basically
know.
was like, yeah, I mean, kind of, but I did. It wasn't me. And then that was the end of it.
Yep. He's like, I'll take the blame, but I really didn't know anything about it. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, dude,
It's
sure
such a
you didn't
weird-
know.
It's a weird denial where he basically took credit for it at the same time as denying it, that was such a weird thing.
Yeah, it's super bizarre. The last story before I let you go. So the federal workforce thing, Donald Trump has this article. I mean, they've talked about it in a few places, but I was going through it on this location. So Donald Trump has put a freeze on federal workers. And
Yeah.
in addition to the freeze on federal workers, he has offered a quote unquote buyout, as they call it, a buyout. And the thought is, we will pay you all the way up to September, after which we have no responsibilities to you if you're willing to get out of the workforce now. So if you leave now, we will give you the money all the way up to that point. Now, the catch becomes, is this even legal? Like, the president, where does the president get the power to do this? I don't even think this is legal. And as people were pointing out, like, what evidence, what proof that these people get paid? So right here, a federal workforce of some 2 million people is still reeling after receiving a mass email that offered the chance to preemptively resign ahead of additional and unspecified Trump administration efforts to shrink the federal government. With the terms of stark but murky ultimatum unclear and likely subject to legal interpretations and challenges, upwards of hundreds of thousands of individual employees were struggling with what to do, increasingly uncertain about the stability of their jobs and their agencies. So these people don't even know if they're going to, A, keep their jobs. They don't know if they're going to be fired. And on top of that uncertainty, it's like, hey, if you volunteer to leave, we will continue to give you the money. Now, I don't know the assurances associated with that. You've had members of Congress saying, don't do this. There's no way to know that you're going to get paid that money, meaning you may quit now and end up just out of a job without any money going to you at all, because there's nothing to say that this is even legal, let alone the president himself having the capability of doing something like this. I've never heard anything like this coming out of a White House, an executive office, where they're like, we need to shrink the federal government. And the way we're going to do that is, oh, I know, let's just offer to buy out people's contracts.
I have a feeling that there isn't any legal precedent one way or the other, and they're kind of just hoping that a bunch of people act and then they can react and figure out how to justify it or legalize it or whatever. Like we had X number of people leave, and so we're going to deal with it with those people gone. We're going to figure out how to where those people were before. How do we, like, I feel like it's a sort of a de facto, like a very libertarian sounding move here, a very allow the government employees to figure this out for us without really them thinking about it that way. Which
Well,
is
they believe that it's coming out of Elon Musk. They think it's his brainchild.
Yeah, I think that that sounds like an Elon Musk move to me, because it's getting these people to do the actual quote unquote thinking for you by not having by not like necessarily enforcing any kind of policy. Like they said, they're evaluating all of this stuff in the meantime. That doesn't mean anything. They may not do anything at all. They may the point might just be to get a bunch of people to quit, and then they figure out what to do after the people are gone. I think that's what it sounds like to me. And I wouldn't be shocked if that's an Elon Musk move, because it very much sounds like an Elon Musk move. Have incentives do the thinking for you rather than, actually figure out a responsible policy to implement.
September. I mean, we're in February. So February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September. So 7 months of free money.
Yeah.
7 months of free money. Would I do that?
It's not a terrible incentive like if you're thinking about like how much a federal employee might get paid, obviously that's going to vary pretty significantly between different types of positions, but potentially that could be a lot of money.
Like, if you're talking about, let's say, $70,000 a year.
Yeah. I mean, somebody could do pretty all right.
And then maybe what, 50,000, give or take? I mean,
Yeah,
we're talking about like
around
7,
there.
8 months.
Somewhere around there. Yeah.
Oh man. So I guess the question is, do you get up the money all at once? There's that.
That's a good question too. Are you getting it as a paycheck as if you're still employed? I mean, again, there's a good reason why they're saying don't do this. They need stuff in writing. That's as far as I'm concerned. If I were to do this, if I were one of these employees, I would not do it unless I had something in writing guaranteeing, money in a certain method or an upfront thing. Like if I had a check that had that amount on it, I would do it. Or if I had a contract that said I was going to get paid, bi-weekly until a certain date, X amount of dollars. I don't know. It is definitely, I don't agree with it. I don't think that is a good idea personally. I think that the right thing to do would be, if you're going to attempt to downsize the government, to actually evaluate what is responsible spending and go from the actual top down with, evaluation, analysis, etc. If that's what you wanted to do, the responsible thing to do would be to do the analysis and then enact policy once you have that. But what they're doing, it's in my opinion, very Ayn Randian type. Let the market speak. It's an invisible hand move. You know what I mean?
Yeah, let people figure it out on their own. Yeah, it does feel like an Ayn Rand thing. I mean, all of this does. It just feels like chaos. Yeah. Oh, we're going to freeze federal spending. We're going to freeze money going abroad. We're going to freeze this. We're going to freeze that. And, when the federal judge put the kibosh, basically like, well, dude, you don't even know what you're freezing. No, there can't be
any legal precedent on this. That's the thing.
Well, that's kind of what Congress was saying. Effectively saying, dude, we gave you money to spend. Now go do it. Like this notion that you could just say, well, I'm not going to spend any money because I don't want to spend any money. It doesn't quite work that way. They appropriated. I mean, God, man, each party has their own way of doing this, right? So Obama can come in and he says, because for example, marijuana is a really good example. You would get a situation where, let's say Obama comes in office. Obama says, I'm not going to go after marijuana in California. I'm not going to touch it. Yes, it's against the law. No, I'm not going to do anything about it. In which case, they allow marijuana stores in order to operate, and then they spread to Michigan, et cetera. Even now, it is still against federal law. And yet, for the all intents and purposes, the president just fundamentally ignores the fact that it's against federal law. And we all agree with him on ignoring the fact that pot is against federal law. And so it's like, what's the difference between ignoring something like that versus Trump coming in and doing whatever he's doing with this, basically blowing off Congress? I guess at different levels, I suppose.
Sure.
Right.
That's I think a very good point. But it's also, in my opinion, really, it highlights how shaky anything is that they don't codify. Yeah. Like everybody talks about how they should have codified Roe versus Wade, and they didn't, specifically because they could have a political argument about it that, worked in their favor. Like it's like, vote for us and we'll keep this safe. Obviously they couldn't do that. So they failed at that and they didn't codify it. So the whole thing, in my opinion, probably backfired in their faces. But the point I'm making is a lot of these like sort of unspoken laws, I guess you could almost say, or unspoken repeals of on the books laws, they're, for all intents and purposes, pretend. Like if tomorrow Trump decided, oh, we're going to prosecute all the marijuana, there's a bunch of people literally with marijuana stores. Like you have the easiest, like big, insane raid you've ever seen in your life, set up across the country. This is maybe a bit of a diversion from the point, but it is kind of scary when you think about like, okay, well, when they just sort of for imaginary reasons, repeal a law, it's I mean, we're actually on a lot of shaky ground if you think about it that way.
All of it shaky ground. It's all perspective, right? I mean, these people are lawyers. They come up with different theories of the case in regards to pursuing a particular objective. Doesn't need to be true. $50 million worth of condoms going to those Hamas fighters.
What do you think they're going to do with that many condoms?
They're clearly using them for bombs.
I feel like it's probably bombs.
Peter Coffin. Peter Coffin is a journalist with 250,000 YouTube subscribers, podcaster, and author. In the book Custom Reality and You, they explore a world where profit is the driving force. You can follow Peter on Twitter at Peter Coffin, and you can purchase their book on Amazon.com. Also, Horseshoe Theory. Check that one out also. Peter, my man, thank you for this. I really appreciate you.
Thank you.
You have a good one. Be safe. And one of my